Welcome everyone and good evening. We are really excited to have our third webinar of our series of 3 on circular economy. Tonight we're hosting a webinar called Green is the New Black, Circularity in Fashion, and we're really delighted to be joined by a great team of Mozambican designers and project managers who are working on a fantastic sustainable fashion project. So if this is your first time and your first introduction to the Circular Economy Lab, we are an initiative that is incubating at the University of Oxford's Said Business School. And we have 3 main goals with the Circular Economy Lab. The first is to raise the profile of the circular economy within Oxford through webinars like these ones, discussions and other initiatives between students at the university. The second is to bridge the worlds of academia and practitioners in circular economy. So conversations like this help us to understand what the barriers are to circularity in the real world, and also for us as students to be able to share our insights on the circular economy from an academic perspective for practitioners who are operating in the circular economy day in and day out. And then our final objective is to connect students at Oxford with circular economy post-Oxford. So we recognize that what job you choose after your experience at Oxford is a hugely influential decision. And as students at Oxford, we're incredibly privileged to have opportunities, and we have a choice with our careers to do something meaningful in the world. So our objective here at the Circular Economy Lab is to connect students with amazing opportunities like the ones that we'll hear about during this webinar. So just to introduce myself, as I'll be co-moderating with one of my team members this evening. My name is Alexis McGivern, and I'm the director of the Circular Economy Lab here at Oxford. And I'll allow my co-host to introduce herself, Maya.
Thanks, Alexis. My name is Maya Adams, and I am working in the education stream of the Circular Economy Lab. And yeah, I'm excited to see how this evening goes. So right now, I actually really delighted to introduce our speakers. I'll start with Her Excellency, Miss Nene Woogui. She's the British High Commissioner of Mozambique. She's held this role since July 2018, and previously was the Deputy Prosperity Consul and the head of prosperity in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She was the first British Black female career diplomat to be appointed High Commissioner. And Miss Woogui Eme has spent 18 years in the Foreign Office, with roles ranging from being an economic advisor for Africa to Chief Press Officer to the Africa Minister. We're really honored to have you here. The next person I'll introduce is Wacy Zacarias. And she is managing the project of Green is the New Black on behalf of the British High Commission in Maputo. She previously studied psychology and human development in New York and has 2 brands to her name. The first is Woogui, I hope I'm saying that right, which is a sustainable fashion brand, and Karingana Textiles, through which she has introduced the idea of storytelling into the tradition of textile design.
Fantastic. And so we have as well, we also have Djamila de Sousa, who is one of the project managers of Green is the New Black, based in Mozambique. And also she studied fashion in both Milan and New Zealand, and co-founded Karingana. She's a storyteller who works to promote ownership and development of African culture and design. And we're also really excited to be joined by 2 designers who participated in the Green is the New Black competition. So Yara Muchanga and Diana Pedro, who are 2 talented designers who we'll hear from a little bit later. So now that we have everyone who's been introduced, I'll hand over to Maya, who has some great questions to start off with.
Yes, thank you, Alexis. So the first question I have will go to Nene. So Nene, tell us, could you explain the origins of Green is the New Black?
Okay, what are the origins? So first and foremost, anybody who knows me knows I love fashion, right? I do really love my clothes and my shoes. And so on one hand, I do have this love for fashion, but also I was a bit shocked to learn how much fashion, in particular fast fashion, contributes to pollution. I think it's the second biggest pollutant to the environment after, the energy oil sector as well as agriculture put together. And so that kind of raised in my mind, how do I carry on loving what I love, but with a conscience and respect for the environment? So that's one. And then on number two is being in Mozambique. This is a very young country, so the population is very young, and a lot of what comes with youth in terms of creativity is playing for everybody to see here across the board. And I held one of the advantages about being High Commissioner is you do get exposed to a cross section of society. And I held in my garden, I think it was like my first year here, an event around sustainable fashion. We wanted to do something around Mozambique Fashion Week. Mozambique Fashion Week is quite a big thing here. And so the team said, well, let's look at sustainable fashion and do something in the margins on that. So literally we turned my garden into a fair, and we invited sustainable fashion designers from Mozambique to come and display. Djamila and Wacy were amongst those who were there. Now, I didn't know what to expect because I didn't think that Mozambique had, I knew that Mozambique had a fashion scene. I didn't know it had a sustainable fashion scene. And I was really struck by the variety and the quality and just how beautiful the stuff was. And off the back of that, we started talking. I think I even spoke to Wacy and Djamila at the time, where did you guys learn this? What are you doing in this space? How is it moving forward? And it became really, really clear about the need to kind of build the link between what is going on here and what we're doing in the UK in this space, because I felt that this is a side of Mozambique that most people are not aware of, first and foremost, that exists. Unfortunately, what people know about this country is colored by the media, and that's usually quite negative. So that was the second thing, the fact that something like this exists. There is a small community. How can we invest in making that community bigger? And how can we link it up with a similar and bigger, slightly more experienced community here in the UK and build those links together? So that was the second thing. And I think the third thing is also when we hear about climate change, this is a country that's like one of the top 10 or top 5 even worst affected countries by climate change. And sometimes that can be daunting and overwhelming. 2 cyclones last year. And the people it will affect the most are the youth. So how do you get them engaged in that conversation in a way that is not fearful, not one that necessarily creates fear, but creates hope and innovation? So we were quite excited at the idea of coming up with this idea of something that basically addresses the biggest challenge of our times right now, which is climate, and then links it with creativity and youth in a way that's both hopeful, but also taps into, again, the whole question of youth and green entrepreneurship moving forward. And how do we link that? So I'm not saying he's going to solve all the problems, but that was kind of like the genesis of the idea. And then luckily, fast forward 6 months later, we got the opportunity to bid as a post for innovative ideas that build the relationship and links between the UK and countries on the continent, and just to come up with ideas that were not business as usual, to think outside the box. And that's how we decided, okay, let's go for green is the new black. And luckily we were one of the ones, actually we came top, we were selected, and the rest is history.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I really like that you're kind of shifting the narrative from something that could be daunting and scary into something that's more regenerative. I think that's really inspiring. So I guess following up from that, what do you think the future of this project is? Are there any short and long-term goals that you have?
We really wanted to run and run. I mean, the short term was starting with a competition where we weren't really even sure what the outcome would be. We wanted to find, initially we wanted to, I think we had about 100 shortlisted, but what we wanted to do was to find the core of 10 students to start with, and then to build the links from there. So in the short term was the competition to identify the talent, and then to train the talent and build the links between the talents and stakeholders and contacts in the UK, and then to carry on that training. Unfortunately, because of COVID, these talented designers were supposed to be in the UK like a couple of months back, but literally that time when everything shut down. But we're lucky we live in the age of technology, and they've been getting the training digitally. If you ask me what my dream is in the long term, I think it's twofold. One, that's something we put in the bid, that we're hoping to kind of stimulate the building of a stronger critical mass of designers in this space. And hopefully it's not just going to be about clothing. You'll see from some of the finalists, yes, they do clothing, but they also do furniture, interior design, thinking outside the box on that front. And right here in Mozambique, I mean, Djamila and Wacy will confirm, there isn't actually an official school of fashion on that front that you can go to. So how do we create a space that's here to stay, that will train future designers on that front? How do we keep this mass growing? And how do we keep them connected to an even larger critical mass, not only in the UK, but regionally? Because across this continent, sustainable fashion is something that a lot of the young people are leading on. So how do we link Mozambique with what's going on in Kenya and South Africa and Nigeria? That's where we want to head it to. And then ultimately, what would be amazing is if we had something like your incubator in Oxford, having a sister incubator here in Mozambique, and a space here where you guys can be coming back and forth and exchanging those ideas and building and trading. So, you know, our vision is not short term, it is long term. Create a critical mass that will just keep building and building on itself, because, you know, this is forever, hopefully. Yeah.
Excellent. That's such a beautiful plan. So I guess on that, you've given such an impassioned speech, and following that, I guess my question.
Throwing down the challenge to you guys.
Okay. Well, my next question to you would be, what's your power-up song? And by that, I mean, what's the song that gets you going?
Oh my God, it depends on what mood I'm in. So I think if you're thinking about the one that makes me just feel my best and most confident, it's a toss-up between Eve's Who's That Girl, and I'm showing my age, and I Am Titanium.
Excellent, excellent.
So that's blast it and sing it and feel it, and then nobody can touch me that day.
All right, thank you so much, Ne.
Thank you.
Right, I guess so. We're going to transition back to Wacy and Djamila. Go ahead, Alexis.
Thanks. I mean, I love the idea of a sister incubator. I think that's such a fantastic idea. And, you know, you were saying that the Green is the New Black finalists were going to come to the UK. I mean, they were going to come to Oxford, and we were going to have an in-person meeting with Circular Economy Lab. So while I'm so glad we can do this virtually, I mean, it would have been so great to be able to do this in person. But hopefully there's a future where we can all do that. So I would love to turn to Wacy and Djamila now and ask you to, you know, your origin story. How did these ideas of sustainable fashion start? How did your brand start together? What is your philosophy? And I'd really like you to answer that both individually and as a partnership. So maybe I'll start with Wacy.
Okay. So I started in fashion self-taught back in 2008. And I created this brand called Woogui. And really it was about, at the time, it was about exploring our traditional fabric. But I think I'm a bit of I'm an Aquarius, so we tend to go against the grain. Everybody started using Capulana in their collections, and I wanted to look for something else, something more. So I started to look deeper in what was Mozambican craft, and working closer with artisans, because my job, because I worked in development, I worked in an NGO, and we had a lot of projects with artisanship. So it kind of came natural to start combining my work in fashion with craft. You know, and fast forward a couple of years when I decided to take fashion a bit more seriously and to study, I was trying to figure out what avenue of fashion made sense, because I did realize at the time that fashion industry was problematic. I did have a very interesting pull towards the way that Indian fashion works, so a lot with the natural dyes and with my craft work here. So back in, I think it was 2011 and 12, I started hearing about this thing called sustainable fashion. That sounds interesting. I wonder what that means, because, you know, the idea of sustainability existed, but I didn't know in relationship to fashion. And the more I read about it, the more I realized, in fact, is what I was already doing in my work with local artisans. Because every collection I worked with different types of artisans, making buttons, dyeing textiles, you know, doing batiks. And I realized that this thing that I was doing kind of naturally, that I had a name. So I applied for a so I went to do a portfolio course in Central Sain Martins in London because I didn't have fashion background. So I needed to do a portfolio course as a bridge. And then I got into this master's program at Esmod Berlin, which is one of the only sustainable fashion courses at the time in the master's level. And it was really like, it was mind blowing, the amount of information and learning about, circular economy and learning about just cradle to cradle and just all the different things that, and the world that sustainable fashion is, but also, beyond being mind blown, understanding the problems within fashion and even within sustainable fashion, right? Because there was a lot of greenwashing going on at the time. And also kind of questioning, how do you apply some of these principles that we were learning to, in Europe, in Africa, where the needs are different and where people are worried about different things. So I think there was two of us, myself and another student from Zimbabwe, and we used to always say, how do you convince somebody who's worried about what they're gonna eat tomorrow that the clothes that they made, like what is fast fashion to somebody who has other things to worry about? And we would raise the question also about, okay, this is beautiful that we're learning about sustainable fashion in Germany, but do you know that all the clothes that are thrown out end up in our secondhand markets in Mozambique? In Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And it was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, so what is very sustainable about this recycling and upcycling that you're talking about? Because we end up with this garbage, quote unquote. And that has killed the fashion industry. South Africa was one of the booming industries that died out because of this. So in that process and in that discovery, I think a lot of questions were raised, but mainly the question about what we then called, or what we now call, African textiles, which is the wax print, and just the way that it's made and the fact that it's mainly produced outside of Africa. And this is what led me to start doing my project all around sustainable textiles and wanting to introduce this idea that, African textiles had to be more about wax, and learning more about the textile history of Africa from Nigeria, from Ghana, which would still the powerhouses of textile today, Mali, and wanting to do more and wanting to bring that back kind of in a way that so the storytelling and wanting people to realize that African textiles was more than wax is what brought me to this project, to the second project, which is Karingana. And so when I met Djamila and we had the same ideas about questions and ideas around the textile industry, it was very natural that we started to think, oh, maybe we should do something together. And that's how Karingana was born, out of this conversation. And it also became quite natural that we would join forces in both brands. So kind of she embraced Woogui, which already existed, and we created Karingana, and it became, this dynamic duo that is today. And yeah, that's in short.
I'm so excited. I'm so happy to hear that, and I'm really excited to hear Djamila's side of the story. But it's funny because a lot of us on the Circular Economy Lab, we study the same course. We study it's a course that does climate science and policy, and we talk all the time about how we're learning these amazing things in the UK context or in the European context. But so many of our classmates are from all over the world. We're a really global cohort. So how are we implementing those solutions? And one of the reasons why we are so excited to speak with you is because circularity is different in different parts of the world. And I liked as well what you said about how you were already doing sustainable fashion. It just didn't have the label to it. So I think that's true of a lot of initiatives. So Djamila, I'll put the same question to you about your origin story and your passion for sustainable fashion and where that came from.
Hi. So I'm Djamila. Well, I started my path straight into fashion design. So I studied fashion and textile design in Italy. And along those first years was just absorbing everything because anything I knew about fashion was fitted by Western culture and history. And then I did a master's degree in cool hunting, which is trend forecasting. And in there, you learn how to analyze society to predict how what are the trends and how the society will dictate those trends. And from there, I started thinking, why do we, knowing the trends beforehand, why do we still follow behind? Because most of the things, specifically in fashion, we used to receive clothing that was from the previous season. So that was something that always intrigued me. Why, if the forecast comes 6 months before, why can't we produce it and be ahead of the Western fashion industry? And the other thing that started in this process is in Italy, you are taught fashion, but in a very segmented way. So you are trained to be a fashion designer, and that's the only thing you do. You just design, and then you pass it on your drawings to a pattern maker, and then to a seamstress, and so on. But since we didn't have any of that here in Mozambique, I was a bit worried about how I could actually make things if I didn't have the tools or the know-how to have all this knowledge for the value chain. And that took me to New Zealand, where I did a second degree in fashion and textile design. And it was because I had the knowledge, they had the more practical knowledge system. And I would learn there how to make things from scratch until the end. And I think that will be more relevant for the context I was coming from. And the other thing that also took me to New Zealand was that I learned about how a textile can be versatile and be used in interior design and in the clothing industry, which I think it will be relevant for Mozambique since we didn't have much resources, and at the same time is to maximize the use of a material. And yeah, when I came back home, I met Wacy while working for another designer, and we started talking. We used to have lots of conversations all together the future of it. And one of the things was specifically about the African wax print, which was very limiting in what you could do with it. And yeah, and that's how we started this conversation to create Karingana.
That's so great. I mean, I think it's so interesting to hear your story and how you developed and how you came together. And so I can imagine this wonderful partnership is from like two very strong roots of this passion for sustainable fashion. And lest I forget, and I apologize for not doing it before, I would love to hear each of your power up songs, so the song that really inspires you and gets you excited and pushes you through the long days when you're working hard.
Well, for me, would be probably most of the songs from Mayra Andrade from Cape Verde, but I really like Vapor de Migração because it really connects with this idea of like a citizen of the world, but how you always have your roots embedded in you. So I think that will be my choice.
I think right now, definitely Mayra Andrade, but right now I'm really into Lizzo because, well, she just embodies what I think every little girl should have from day one, the amount of confidence and I just love everything she does. And yeah, so I think my playlist is Lizzo right now, and yeah.
That's awesome. I'm a huge Lizzo fan as well. So I'll pass on to Maya.
Right. So I guess the next question to the both of you is, how do you incorporate the local communities that you're embedded in? How do you incorporate their local materials and cultures within your design? And I guess we can start with, yeah, Djamila, go ahead.
So I think in our design process, we start actually with the material. So that's instead of having a design and then go and find the material, we do the other way around. We think about the techniques and the materials that are available locally. And then we also like the idea of bridging different type of materials. And so we work with different types of artisans to create one piece. And that applies to the accessories, but also to the textiles. We like to, for example, when we develop a print, we like to mix like handmade elements with digital, or hand printing with batik. So we try to cross a lot of techniques as much as we can. One, because it's fun, and secondly, because it makes something unique and creates a unique language. So I think that comes naturally by looking around us and see what's available.
I think in our work process, we're storytellers by nature, and so every object that we make or every item is a different story, and we'd like to think that our designs are very much human-centered. So it's about making sure that the story of the makers also come out in this process and in the final design. So it's more about creating a platform for local craft and artisans, and we really wanted to create something that was luxurious but 100% African, because this idea that something becomes luxury when it's made in somewhere, when it's made by a Western brand and then it's made in somewhere in Africa, and then it gets a label, and then now it's luxurious. And we were always wondering, how do you make sure that the value stays at the local level, which is always very exciting. And I think that's the way design should be produced. The people who make it should be the ones to benefit from it. And really, we do something that we call material mapping in the design process. So as Djamila mentioned, before we start with anything, we map out materials, we map out skills, we map out stories, and try as much as we can to embed. So we try and do a co-creative process with the artisans and with the communities that we work with.
That's fascinating, and I really like the iterative process that you kind of mentioned, and how you're putting story at the front of your operations. So I guess in terms of stories, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in the webinar as well, but you have these backgrounds that has you've learned from all these different places. So we have Berlin, New Zealand, Wacy in Central Sain Martins. Was that in New York or in London? London. Okay, so London, there was in New York as well. So yeah, you kind of have all these different influences. So I'd be curious to hear from you both about how studying fashion abroad, and as Nene was mentioning earlier, that there isn't an institute for this kind of sustainable fashion design within Mozambique, how that has influenced your work in the long term. So maybe I'll start with Wacy.
I think studying fashion abroad, or living abroad, just made me appreciate my culture more in general. But it also meant that I'm a little bit, I tend to say that I'm not 100% Mozambican anymore, because I carry a little bit of the different places with me. And it's very funny because before I went anywhere else, I studied, when I was very young, I lived in London for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I always had a very strong connection to London. So outside of Mozambique, the one place that I feel most at home has always been London. So even when I was studying in Germany, every single chance that I got, I would be in London for the weekend, because I think that London has such a vibrant culture, and because it's so multicultural, and it's a very as somebody who lives outside of the country, it's very difficult to be able to feel at home. And I think that being in London as a Mozambican, as a Black woman, it's one of those cities that you just feel like you belong. It's like you get off the train and you're no longer an other. You're just part of the crowd, and it's a moving crowd, and it's going in all directions, and it's so dynamic. And I think I always try and take that, a bit of that back with me to my design practice, is this idea that, you know, we are rooted in Africa, rooted in Mozambique, but there is a whole different world of things that are happening, and all of these voices are important. You know, there's a very big part of me that is connected to New York, of course, because I lived in New York for 7 years. And so it's very hard not to bring back that influence into your design. So I think in the end, you end up being a little bit of all of these places. There are some things in the ways that I try to minimalize some of my designs, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's definitely the German influence in this process. But I think the most important thing about having lived in all of these places and then having, you know, being lucky enough to come back, is to realize that in Mozambique or in other places, you have just as much talent. What you may not have is the same kind of opportunities, which is why, for me, this project and this opportunity to work with the British High Commission was so important, because it gave you know, young people in Mozambique the opportunity to engage with sustainable fashion in the way that I had been engaged. And I think sustainability and sustainable fashion in the UK is so advanced. And I mean, I've seen some amazing projects in my last visit to London, and I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that after, I don't know if COVID is ever going to be finished, but whenever this non-flying part of this is over, I'm really hoping that they do get to go to the UK and they do get to see firsthand the amazing work that is done, because it is important for all of them to know what is possible, you know, because I think for all of us, leaving our home place and coming back is about understanding the possibilities. So what is being done? How has the world developed? What is the next big thing? And how do I do it here in these conditions, in this place, you know, in this environment? But having that benefit of going and coming back, I think it's very important. And I'm praying that this happens, that we somehow manage to bring a little bit of that here.
I really hope so as well. I think that would be fantastic. So I'll ask the same question to Djamila.
So as Wacy said, I think having the experience to go abroad helps you to expand your horizons and also start learning about similarities, because when you are in your hometown or home country, sometimes you dream about something that is far beyond, and you think that everything is greater and better outside, but and also sometimes you think it's different. But once you get to other places and you learn how people do things and how they behave, you start understanding that they are as similar as you, but at the same time, you also learn that there are so many other ways of doing things. And I think for me, that was the most valuable thing I could get. But at the same time, it was very interesting for me, the coming back and the process of learning a completely new area of like fashion, because as we said, we don't have much fashion exposure back home, and back in the day even less. So when you start, it's like learning a new language with certain codes. And when you get back home, you start understanding that those codes were not created for that place and were not created by those people. So most of the things we can try to replicate, but they don't make sense. So it made me also think that we have so much potential, and we also have so much that we can create from scratch in our own context. And I think that this opportunity of having this competition, Green is the New Black, is also a great way of putting this group of designers to work with what we have here. Because sometimes you get limited when you have too much access to things. Then you start thinking, well, if I just had that laser machine, or if I just had that screen printing lab. But the reality is, when we came back, we started to understand that the resources were limited. But I think that's the beauty of Africa. And I think that's why we are so creative, because we have less resources. So we just have to create the world with nothing, basically. And I think that's the takeaway from me. Yeah.
That's so great. I mean, it's just so inspiring to hear from you both about your journeys and what, you know, all of these knowledges that you've picked up from all over the world and your studies and your experiences, and then coming back to Mozambique and not only, you know, setting up these amazing design companies or design firms, but also making sure that you're sharing that knowledge, that you're creating this new generation of designers who have this capacity and knowledge and this passion that you're sharing. I think it's so fantastic. And speaking of this amazing skill and talent that's within Mozambique, I really want to chat to some of the finalists for Green is the New Black. So we have Yara and Diana here. And my first question to you both, and maybe we'll start with Yara, is I would love to hear the inspiration behind your projects and behind your designs, and you know, the materials that you use and the kind of inspiration that went into your design. So I'll start with Yara.
Hi, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on the audio. So, sorry for my English. I'm not practicing my English lately, so I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying. So, first of all, I'm studying chemistry, and I didn't have the opportunity to study fashion. So I somehow I studied chemistry, and last year I had like a subject was about environment, was about like a sustainable chemistry, something like that. I don't know how to explain exactly in English because I'm studying in Portuguese. So we're talking about like how long things how long things transform in the environment, like plastic and whatever. And we know that lots of our fabrics are synthetic, so they are terrible for the environment, no? So that's why I thought to work to how can I say this? I started thinking about how can I make fashion and using more natural fabrics. Yes. So I started focus on this part because as I'm a chemistry student, so when I saw the project, the Green is New Black, I started thinking about like what can I propose as a sustainable project. Then I look at a black that I have with with the material that I use is I forgot the name. It's like leaves, but when you put in a bag, you know, I forgot the name. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yes. So the material that I used to do my outfit was like I always see in bags and all different things. I never saw in clothes. So I thought think about like if we use the leaves of the plants to make clothes, because I was focused on the origin of the material. I wanted to use natural materials. So that's why I made my coats with natural material. And I wanted to talk about the soil too. That's why, because I know that agriculture, it's one of the most it's one of the activities who pollutes the environment, and the fashion industry use agriculture too to make the fabrics. So that's why I use leaves and a little bit of metal to represent the agriculture.
Wow, that's so cool. And Yara, you're making me feel very ashamed because I've always said, oh, designers have this amazing design brain. I could never design, but you're a chemistry student and you're also a designer. So you're just doubly talented in all domains. But
I'm not that good as a chemistry student, because I'm studying chemistry because I didn't have the chance to do what I love. But I'm really grateful because it makes me know different things that I know that other people don't realize. How can we be like hurting our environment with small things? This is something that I'm so glad that the chemistry gave to me.
Yeah, it's so great. And it's what a way to take one discipline and merge it with another and be able to communicate your passion for the environment in different ways. So I loved that story. I'll put the same question to Diana. What is your inspiration and what are the materials that you used in your design?
Actually, the inspiration comes from the combat. Sorry, my English not very good, like Yara. Yes, I mean the inspiration comes from combating the pollution on national beaches, because here in Mozambique we see a lot of garbage down to the ocean, and I think it's so bad. In other hand, fashion is currently the second biggest polluter after oil. And I think it's time for everybody make small changes and everything will be okay. The materials I use for the green is the new black. I use caps, I use denim, I use seashells, and yeah, so sorry. Yeah, I use these three type of materials.
That's fantastic. I mean, I love as well, like the ability to communicate like a very specific environmental problem through a method or like design that is accessible to everyone. So I think it's such a fantastic idea. So I'll hand over to Maya for another question.
Thank you, Alexis. So I guess the next question for both the designers is, what are your plans going forward with this experience? Do you see these, the skills that you've learned in this process being applied beyond fashion or beyond this experience? I'd just like to know a bit about that. Diana, you can go ahead.
Okay. I think I would like to create a clothing brand, a sustainable clothing brand, and in a world where everybody will be very good with the environment. I think it's very great.
Thank you, Diana. Yara, what do you think?
I'm so sorry. Yes. Hi.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes.
Okay. So, where do you think these skills that you've got, what are your plans for them moving forward?
Okay. So I want to say something more. Like, I remember the material now. I use straw and the metal that people use you know, the soda, that metal thing that they have in a glass, you know. Yeah, and I use straw to make my dress. Okay, so what I want to do with my skills, let me think. It's a lot of things. So first of all, I want to have my own brand, and I want to make sustainable fashion, and I would like to teach, like, open organization who helps people to save what they consider trash, you know, like, teaching people how to reutilize the trash, how can they make, like, even houses, different things with trash, not just so also fashion. Because here in Mozambique, I see people like children's, uh, putting like, glasses and simple like trash in the middle of the street, because people don't know how to deal with the trash. So I think that, the thing that I want the most is open organization that helps people to learn how to deal with trash and use for different things, and then a lot of things.
All right, thank you, Yara. I think I have a few questions left just for Djamila and Wacy. Let's see. Is there anything that surprised you while you were running the Green is the New Black project? And was in the sense that was it something that you didn't learn while you were studying fashion or sustainable fashion? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think one of the things that really amazed me is how in 3 weeks these 10 finalists could create or recreate their designs, because they all applied with a design and a small brief of what they wanted to do. But as the first week of workshops started, most of them completely evolved their idea and started applying new things. And this concept of sustainability in some cases was not completely formed, but through visits to the local markets and exploring a little bit of how trash could be used to do something, they just created the most amazing garments. And I must say also that most of them did not have a fashion background, which is amazing. And I think I personally, I'm not sure if I could do that in my first 3 weeks of studying fashion design. So yeah, I think it was really, really well done.
Yeah, I think I'm with Djamila when the most surprising aspect of the whole competition, I think, was the amount of talent. And I think, again, and you know, if Patrick were here, he would definitely agree that what what we found is that, you know, these young people had, you know, world-class talent. And what you can understand is that talent doesn't really depend where you're from in the world. What is sometimes missing is the platform and the tools that you need to put that out there to the world. And I think that Patrick did an amazing job of training these young people and getting them to do patterns and churning out these amazing garments in, like Djamila said, 3 weeks, which is, I think I would have personally, when I'm thinking back in my school days, I would have probably been too overwhelmed to be able to churn out something that quick. I'm a bit like I didn't tell them at the time, but I'm a bit like some of them with when I have too many ideas and then it takes me a very long time to kind of process everything out and just choose one. So I think 3 weeks are probably broken down like more times than anybody needs to know, but they did it, and I was very proud of that. You know, and I think when you, of course, theory is one thing, but when you're on the ground and you're making things, it's completely different. And then you actually learn that it's really about taking what you have and making something beautiful with it. And I think over and over, we've proven in different ways that, yes, you know, studying is important and you do need to know the technique and everything else, but creativity is definitely something that either you have it or you don't. And I think that comes at the end of, that shows in the end, because you could have, I don't know, 100 years of school, but if you don't have that creative bone in you, then you're not going to churn out. So I think for them, I would love to see what would happen if they have more training, you know, what would they come up with? Because I'm pretty sure it would still be amazing.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think, and you were referring to Patrick Monroe, who is an haute couture designer who went to Mozambique and did training with these designers who unfortunately couldn't be here, but just had so much expertise to share. And I think that's one of the things that's so great about this project is the exchange of knowledge and of inspiration, because there's so many amazing designers who are coming up with these amazing creative ideas that can inspire designers in the UK, and designers in the UK can lend some knowledge on the kind of more the technical parts of design. So it's just a really cool and fun exchange. So I'm so sad to say that we've come to the end of the webinar. I mean, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, because I'm just feeling so inspired and bubbled up by this amazing energy in this Zoom room. But just wanted to say on behalf of the Circular Economy Lab that we're so grateful to you all for taking the time to chat with us. It's just been such an interesting conversation, and we're really excited to keep this link, and I really hope that in 2021 or whenever we're able that we can have some of these amazing designers and you all come and join us in Oxford, and looking forward to that sister incubator. So just thank you so much to Nene, to Wacy, Djamila, Yara and Diana for joining us. We really appreciate it. And of course, thanks to Maya, who was co-moderating with me this evening. So thank you all so much, and we look forward to chatting again sometime soon.